Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm Joanna Roach. I'm the Executive Director of GSN Planet. I am so pleased that you are all here this afternoon. We are in presentation 2 with Benna, and today we are going to talk about the benefits of mineral hot spring waters. The waters of the human body require minerals to regulate our metabolism, hormones, enzymes, and general health. Research has demonstrated that natural mineral waters refresh oxygen levels within the body, revitalize the skin, calm the nerves, and are beneficial to the functioning of certain body systems. So excited to hear this presentation today. We have a few members of BANA with us. Jane Abbott is on the line. She's their Director of Language, the Waters, and the Board President. Dr. Jonathan Paul de Vierville, or JP, who is our friend here at GSN. He is the Director of Spa Culture's Board Vice President, and is the author of A History of American Spas and Healing Waters. And then Marcus Coplin, who is Director of Water Medicine and the Board Treasurer. He is a doctor of naturopathic medicine and is based in Seattle. Welcome to all of you. And let's see. So I think I will turn this over to JP, because you're going to kick us off. Is that correct?
Yes, I am.
So really, I just want to say thank you very much for partnering with us to bring this presentation to our membership. We really very much appreciate it, and looking forward to your talk today. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. As Bogart said too, this should be the beginning of an interesting long relationship. There's a lot for us to talk about here today. I'm going to kind of give an overview, and then lead into Marcus. We'll give some more specifics in terms of the chemistry. We're going to look at Balneology and BANA, and we've been in operation BANA has been for over a decade now. Actually, of course, Balneology goes way back. As you can see, we've been able to have actually 2 brands, but what we're all about is a research, information, education in terms of waters and spa cultures in terms of its wellness, hygiene, healthcare, therapeutic healing, and wholeness. So again, it's all about the waters and what is happening with waters, particularly geothermal mineral waters. But these are some images of what's going on with, but what is really important is whole consciousness with waters. We're not going to talk about it today, but there is an intelligence there. Now, the anomalies I'll get into a little bit. There's something very special. It's beyond science in a sense. One would say there's a relationship that we have with our consciousness and intelligence with waters. But I would ask each of you, and we talked about this last time, to look at your watershed. Where does the water come into your life? Where does the water go out of your life? Not only yourself personally, but as well as the spa setting that you're in. There's some really fascinating things in terms of the geometry of a water droplet. I mean, it is organized, and this is some interesting things in terms of getting into the sacred geometry and the root 4. And this we'll get into at a later time. We're hoping to have some more seminars and maybe even come to your conferences and talk more specifically into the consciousness and the intelligence that is in water. If you take a look at water from the cosmic perspective, a cosmological perspective. Here you can see the water drop of Earth just over the edge of the moon. So, I mean, we are basically, Earth is one huge mineral drop of water, and we're all participants on this drop of water from a cosmic point of view. But again, all human life on planet Earth is wet. We are, you and me, all of us are conscious, cognitive, molecular mineral waters in motion. A finely tuned conglomeration of hydrological, biological, chemical, physiological, psychological, spiritual, refined processes of flowing forms, clean, clear, and complex. So water is complex, and so are we. So we are the waters, sensing, thinking, feeling, imagining, becoming, wellness in being. And again, how you relate to water has fundamentally how you live with your wholeness, and especially in terms of the planet and our relationship, to nature. So our bodies, brains, hearts, minds, along with our living experiences of listening, seeing, touching, tasting, smelling, as well as remembering, imagining, conceptualizing, sleeping, and dreaming are simply the waters becoming conscious. And we'll get into, again, what is this conscious waters? And I'll have some references. Okay, the waters. Bana, we're about drinking the waters, eating cultures, and we're research, we're education, we're information, but we're also community. We're hoping that we can facilitate water communities that people are aware of waters by, of the waters, by the waters, and for the waterings. So to look at this in terms of the big picture, we can look at water from arts and language, from sciences and technology, the social political aspects, the religious and the mythological. Today, we'll talk a little bit more about the scientific and the medical. Marcus will talk on that. But again, balneology and balneological is all about the waters, referring to the study and how we drink the waters, how we bathe, and what is the medium that we're in. So the various types and temperatures of drinks and drinking, baths and bathing, minerals and gases, plants, herbs, muds within, and wellness and health conditions applicable to the use of baths, inhalation, steam, sauna, drinking. And in our case, cause and concern, the waters of North America. Again, that's what we're looking at. And we're thinking that, again, water is the blood of nature. And so how you connect with the water is really, really fundamental. Again, the drinking, the bathing arts, as well as the arts of drinking and the cultures that go with this, the beauty of therapy. And beyond art and beauty, there's also the science and the technologies. There's the social, political, the economics, and congratulations, you're having your buying conference, which is really important, the products that are used with waters. And then the moral, the religious, and the spiritual experiences and practices, what are our real spiritual relationships to the water. But when integrated, these fields of appreciation, knowledge, and experience and practices makes for a culture of drinking and bathing, baths, in other words, spa cultures. So again, spa cultures include the full range: wellness, well-being, healthcare, hygiene, therapy, rehabilitation. Spa and wellness go together. It is our priority, as well as a priority that both spa and wellness include the waters. So again, this is a bit redundant here, but it's looking at water from 4 different directions in terms of how you perceive the water. How you perceive is what you see. Again, looking at the holistic view. What is full drop of water, and how does it form, and how does it flow? Now, again, this is some resources going back. Again, one thing different with water than in technology, there really isn't an upgrade. Nature is nature, and nature continues. Of what we do to the water, that would affect it in terms of the way we treat the water. But here are some old sources that you might take a look at, especially The Spiritual Life of Water, Its Power and Purpose by Alex Bartholomew. He was the fellow that wrote Jonathan Livingston Seagull. He produced that. Very interesting fellow in England. He's since passed away. But Mineral Springs, so you can see a lot of the deep resources. And this is one thing that we're doing at Bana, is setting up a deep archive for some of these ancient sources. At Bana, we have, again, the 10 domains. We're looking at different aspects. We're also looking at best practices and the sense of stewardship and our matrix, our flow form. And we can get into that later at another time. Janet mentioned that last time, but it's always kind of there, the flow form, which is kind of in this image, how everything is connected through the flower of life patterning. So water is a most extraordinary substance. Practically all its properties are anomalous. And that's what is so fascinating in terms of the mysteries of water. Water is a mystery. Water is the most common substance phenomena on the planet, but also the most mysterious. We usually don't see it as mysterious. We just take it for granted, turn on the faucet or flush the toilet. But water is central to all biological life and much, much more than a simple molecule. The list of anomalies in water are lengthy. And this is, we get into water is not only a substance phenomena on the earth that naturally occurs in 3 states: solid, liquid, vapor, and gas. Water as gas is one of the lightest clouds. It produces our clouds. Water is liquid and it's denser, and it's water is solid and ice. And but of all the anomalies, here's a wide range. If you start to get into the deep chemistry and physics of water, there are 13 phase anomalies. There's density anomalies, 22. There's 17 material anomalies. There's thermodynamic, 11 anomalies. There's physical anomalies. So there's just a whole lot of anomalies. There's also what they're now discovering, the fourth phase of water: gas and vapor, liquid fluid, exclusion zone, E-zone, easy water. The work of Dr. Jerry Pollack, bioengineering at University of Washington. Fantastic research, what they're discovering in terms of a fourth phase of water in terms of its structure. But again, 6 layers or model for research, looking at research into the anomalous phenomena of waters. And part of that is the physical and the biochemical and the mineral waters. But we can look at it physically, manifestations. We can look at it anti-physical factors, the psychic factors, the physiological factors, psychological factors, again, the psychic factors, and the cultural factors and effects. All of these kind of go together with this whole phenomena of where water is contained and where water flows. Again, looking deeply into water, ask yourself, and this, now, I wish I could see each of you. It's hard to, to have a conversation one way. A conversation is both speaking and but ask yourself in terms of where are the forms of water in my life? What are the forms and flow that regenerate and grow me with my water in terms of my bathing, my hydration, all of that? And what are the images? I would ask you as we go, we have 2 more sessions with this, but start looking for images, forms, numbers, patterns that and you certainly will find out the spiral, the vortex, the torus, and the phi, which is all fundamental to sacred geometry. What is so fascinating is they're finding out hidden geometry within water, which leads to this phi spiral of 1.618, the golden mean, the flow pattern of nature. And if, fundamentally, if a GSN can find these flow patterns of nature, I think that will give you sustainability and a regenerative capacity. It's more than just the technology. It's much more than just electrical connection. But again, spa waters and spa wellness. If the human species, the Homo sapiens sapien, is conscious, sensing, thinking, feeling, intuitive waters, then how are human waters, the molecules and DNA interfaced, interrelated, integrated with our bodies and minds, especially in our pineal gland? Again, there's some interesting research going on there. If spa waters are the process, then spa wellness and well-being are the outcomes. So all of you, in terms of your spa setting, they're temples. They're really a deep level. And some of the most recent research coming onto this is the phenomenological information, where actually water has intelligence in it. Check out worldinadrop.com. It's some of the very interesting research that is actually coming out of the space research in Germany, but it's information that will really intrigue you, and we could continue and have an interesting conversation. There are other things where they are embedding dreams. Now people are actually sleeping and they're able to embed imagery out of their dream work. So again, here are a few more resources. The Human Soul, that World in a Drop. You can see the book Sacred Springs, The Spiritual Life of Water. Highly recommend the great work by Thomas Berry, Spirit and Soul by Edward Casey, and then the scientist, the structured water is changing models. And then, of course, the power of places. So where your water comes from, and that's what is really important to Bana. And we're looking at where the source site specific, where this water comes from, what is its origin in Mother Earth in terms of the full water cycle, and how that impacts individuals at these sources, as well as health and wholeness. So that leads me here to the Epidaurus dream temples. And I'm going to stop here today. This will be part of the 4th presentation, where we get into the sense of rest, because again, what happens at your locations, at your temple sites, is the engagement with the water, but also what happens to your consciousness during your rest periods, and when you afterwards, after you've prepared yourself for this relationship with the most mysterious substance on earth. So with that, I'm going to stop in terms of the larger cultural context. This is in Greece, and Marcus just returned from Greece. I don't know, he visited several sanctuaries there, so he's bringing this deep Greek ancient healing temple spirit to this conversation. So Marcus, if you'd like to take it away, I'll finish. I can close my slides here.
Yeah, I'm happy to take it on. Thanks, Jay Paul. I think you just need to stop your screen share and I can start mine. But yeah, I have to say, just before I dive into my portion of the talk today, I always learn something listening to Jonathan, and it's such a joy to work with him because of that. A lot of the cultural, let me just get my slides up here. A lot of the cultural elements to health and bathing practices, we attempt to codify them through our organization. And I think we're all lucky to have Jonathan be able to kind of break it down in such wonderful verbiage. It gives me so much to work on. And, we spent such this period here kind of overviewing a lot of the cultural nodes within the field of balneology. What I'm going to focus on is I'm going to go a little bit more direct and talk about the physical interaction that occurs with water at the therapeutic or medicinal level. So I got my slides up here. So my name is Dr. Marcus Coplin. I'm the Director of Water Medicine for the Balneology Association of North America. And I come by that role out of two kind of credentials. One, I'm a primary care physician. I have a specialty in naturopathic and integrative therapies. And two, I have built a primary care practice that focuses on physical therapy intervention to treat and manage a host of complex chronic illnesses, everything from autoimmune disease, digestive issues, hormonal imbalances, cancer support, kind of the gamut. I come by the work in our field here and at the Balneology Association because of water's, Jay Paul alluded to this in his slides about the anomalous effects of water. Water has these really specific and unique physical properties that interface and interplay with our bodies in a really uncharacteristic way when we look at other types of material in the world. And so at our organizations really focusing on the mineral water soak and what happens with the combination of these things. And that's what we're going to walk through with these slides here. What's happening to a body that is soaking in thermal mineral water? So balneology.org, that's our association's website. We're really happy to be working with GSN and building all these relationships because fundamentally, I think we're all here to promote health, healing, and wellness and be that voice in the world to kind of spread that information and good news. And there's a whole lot of ways to go about it. And like Jonathan mentioned in his slides, there's a sense of site and source specific content that comes with whether it's a spa, whether it's a spring, whether it's a house of healing in any way that's delivered. And I think that everyone who's kind of on this call understands that on some level. And so what I want to kind of do with these next few slides is give you all some language around what's happening at the physical level and how me as a physician will think about how these therapeutic qualities of mineral water, thermal mineral water, can affect conditions in the people that are coming into my practice. And you can check us out at balneology.org. It has a lot of our other initiatives there and kind of places to help support our mission in spreading research and education and information about thermal spring bathing in North America. So we're going to focus on the Trinity of Healing today. The Trinity of Healing is the three major interfaces or interactions that thermal water has on our body. We have the thermal, the physical, and the chemical. So I'm going to dive right in. The thermal effects, I just need to adjust my screen real quick so I can read my own slides. So the thermal aspect of water, of course, has to do with heat and how heat is transferred. And that's one of the anomalous things that water has, is it has the ability to transfer heat energy in and out of the body at a much more efficient and with much more it has a higher capacity to do that than other substances. And so when we're actually looking to alter temperatures and move energy in the body, literal thermal energy, water has a very unique ability to do that. What the research plays out, and that's really where I'm kind of focusing these slides the slides today, is what does the research show us about the effects that these three different effects of water have? We know that thermal water soaking will increase metabolic function. We know it can affect the regulation of hormonal signals. ACTH, cortisol, growth hormone, beta endorphins, noradrenaline, prolactin. These are all different hormonal chemicals signaling different functions in the body. And they're all kind of talking back and forth to each other. One of the things that thermal bathing does, and let me just be clear, when I say thermal bathing, this is when we look at the thermal effects, that can be, these effects happen on their own without the necessity of the physical and the chemical effects that we're going to get into. So I want to kind of present what each thing does on its own and then kind of draw it all together as the synergy that these three things have together. So thermal bathing could be as simple as a sauna or a steam bath, or it could be immersion therapy in a neutral water, a hydrotherapy, or a balneological soak in thermal spring water. So regulation of hormonal signals, it will upregulate hormones that are too low, downregulate hormones that are too high. Reduced inflammation systemically. These little kind of code numbers here are all different chemicals that are markers or signals for inflammatory processes in the body, and they've been shown scientifically to reduce in the presence of a thermal experience, whether that's, again, sauna, hot tub, thermal spring, what have you. Improve stress tolerance. So stress tolerance is a metric that's looked at to say, how well is your body adapting to different stressors in their life? Those could be biochemical stresses, could be physical stresses. Sometimes those could even be mental stresses. And we find that there's reduced cell damage, reduced oxidative stress, and the induction of something called a heat shock protein, which actually is kind of like a repair mechanism, or sets in process a bunch of repair mechanisms for the body. So this overall improved tolerance to stressors on the body through thermal bathing. Now, we also have overall improved circulatory function, and anyone who's sat in a sauna or a hot tub or a hot spring knows, you can feel your heart beating faster. You can see the blood, the redness of the skin is the circulatory, the capillary beds opening up and getting engorged with peripheral blood circulation. So that's enough for the thermal effects. Excuse me. So physical effects. So when you're immersed in a body of water, there's something that's called hydrostatic pressure, and that's the actual the pressure of the water that's surrounding the body that exerts a force on our physical body. It improves cardiovascular function, it improves urinary output, and it helps to regulate blood pressure just on its own. There's something called buoyancy, like we have this glass ball that's floating on the water. This is a property of water, is that, different objects will float at different levels. And when we soak a human body in water, that buoyancy causes a feedback mechanism where the muscles of the body no longer feel gravity's effects and therefore begin to relax. Kind of like what happens with massage therapy, where the kind of stimulation to the muscle fibers relax it. This has a different mechanism, but it has that same effect of relaxation of fibers, which helps, remove metabolic waste from muscle tissue and improve circulation. Of course, there's the viscosity of the water, the strength or resistance training that can happen. Like if you're moving through the water. It's a lot more difficult to move through water than it is through air. This property gets used a lot in physical rehabilitation from chronic injuries to help strengthen the muscles of the body that maybe it'd be too hard to walk upright, but you can walk in a body of water. So the chemical now, this is the big one for where we as balneologists stand. And, of course, the word balneology is not common parlance. We're trying to make that more common. So I hope you leave today kind of having heard it a few times and understand, where it's coming from. And balneologists are those of us who study the health effects, the cultures, and the scientific literature around how thermal mineral waters affect our bodies. So the mineral point of it is a huge one for us because it's what separates a balneological treatment or a balneotherapy treatment from a hydrotherapy treatment. Up until now, the things that I said to you can be true for any thermal water bath. This takes it to kind of a new level when you integrate the mineral component. So what you have here are enhanced effects that are when you compare them to non-mineral thermal bathing. So you have this direct antioxidant effect. You can actually measure an increased reduction in oxidative damage to the body. That is not an induced it's not stimulating your body to clean those oxidants up at a faster rate. It's actually directly neutralizing them, the minerals in the water. There's also an enhanced anti-inflammatory effect that then is seen over traditional hydrotherapy treatments. An analgesic or pain relieving effect. There's an immunological effect, meaning that immune cells are actually, the functioning of the immune cells are increased. And a neuroendocrine effect. And the neuroendocrine effect is talking about how the neurological set points that stimulate different hormonal output functioning. So all this is in addition to the already established effect of thermal water bathing. So that when you have the three together, you actually have a very potent therapeutic agent that when you apply it to a case with kind of rational understanding, you can actually really have a tremendous effect on people's health. So the question always is, well, what is this water good for? I have this sulfur spring, what does it do? What I would say to people is that the benefits of balneology will be seen in any condition that has an inflammatory, a neurological, an immune, a musculoskeletal, a hormonal, or any kind of functional component to the pathology. And what that means is most things. Most things will be helped with the aid of balneotherapy and kind of the understanding of how to rationally apply balneological principles. So the classic and researched conditions, when you look into the literature about what types of things are they measuring and looking at to say what's the benefit? Well, the classic ones are things like cardiac disease. Oops, back. So cardiac disease, like high blood pressure, heart disease, circulatory problems. You've got rheumatic disease like arthritis, skin conditions such as psoriasis or eczema, metabolic disease like diabetes and just weight gain in general. There's actually some really interesting weight loss research out there with the aid of thermal spring soaking. I think the psychological research is super interesting where, people are being treated for anxiety, depression, the chronic pain conditions like fibromyalgia, muscle pain, chronic muscle pain, immune issues, people who are chronically sick with immune dysfunctions or chronic viral infections, inflammatory diseases. So there's a lot of applications in the anti-aging field and chronic fatigue, things like this. And of course, hormonal conditions as well. So these are kind of the areas where I think of when I have a case coming in where I'm saying, how can we utilize different physical agents, balneology being the main one that I'm looking at today. And that's what I have for you all today. So thank you for your time on these slides. I hope you all learned something. And when I'm back, I think I'm going to be on the next one that GSN and BANA are doing together. We're going to be talking a little bit about hygiene and we're going to do some basic hygienic principles, but I also want to talk about how hygiene applies to health in these kind of similar types of conditions, how we can be thinking about health as a hygienic practice and how that can be something that you can take back to your spas and your places of business. So that's it from me. Thanks, JP, and thank you all at GSN for having me here. I'm going to stop my screen here and give it back to you, JP.
Good. I'm looking at some of the questions I see. Well, the first question was, what's your favorite hot springs? And that was, we all have our different experiences there, virtual experiences. But then I see one here from Calistoga. I see Peter Philippe has put that in there. And then there's a question here. Does temperature have an impact? Hotter, the better. Cold, question mark. Been
Great
enjoying.
Let's start with that question, because that's a great one. So there are definitely thresholds of temperature ranges that will have a different type of effect. And so there is what you would consider hot, what you would consider neutral, and what you would consider cool or cold. So hot, I would say, is anything over 100 degrees. Neutral is anything between 96 and 100. And then cool is in that kind of like sub 90s level. And cold is, of course, below that. Now, they all will have a variety of different effects. No one is better than the other. It really just depends on what your goal is therapeutically and having a rational understanding of that. And maybe that's something we can dive into a little bit at the next one, because it's complicated. And the short answer is yes, it does affect it, but there's not one that is the best. They all have different effects depending on what you're trying to accomplish.
Qualitative, and in the contrast to geothermal, there's the whole there's the whole field of hydropathic treatments, which was during the 19th century, where they would actually use hot water or cold water to create body heat for for fevers and things like that. And there again, there's hydropathy, there's hydrotherapy, there's balneology, there's these variety of fields of practice.
And I see another question here. Thalassotherapy is definitely a form of balneotherapy, balneology. Thalassotherapy is bathing in seawater. Seawater is highly mineralized, mostly sodium chloride, obviously, but other minerals as well. And and even though it's cool water or maybe even cold water, I'm from the west coast of the United States. It's definitely cold water up where I'm from. But it does have a therapeutic effect. But of course, that thermal wing of the Trinity is going to be changed from the effects I presented on today are mostly hot water bathing effects. So, but the physical effects and the mineral effects are still present in thalassotherapy, which is definitely included under the umbrella.
Good. I see. Again, Warm Springs, Fountain of Youth, different places. Again, they're all good. And of course, it's how you use them in terms of the time, the water, the rhythm that you use with the water. But here I see Kim saying something about the 2022 Hot Springs Conference. That I think is going to be in Hot Springs, Arkansas in May. I'm not exactly sure of that, but Hot Springs, Arkansas. Call Vicki Nash. She's the person who is working with that, but Bonna will also be there, of course. The question, now this is a hard question, Marcus. Well, it's not really hard, but it's the reality. Question submitted during the registration was COVID-19, and does it survive in water, steam, and sauna? What is the latest information on COVID-19 and balneology?
I hate to kind of like I hate to give a cagey answer on this, but I also don't want to come away and say, yeah, everything's great. You heard it here first, and then you go back and find out that your county and local regulations are different. So I would say that there's ample evidence that that the virus is controlled in a heat environment, meaning it will die off in high temperatures. But the evidence doesn't state that we should be going above and beyond our local regulations. So just stick with whatever your local government's saying until otherwise heard. Sorry for not being able to give a better answer on that, but just the time of this.
Mm-hmm.
I will say that let me pull it up real quick, because for those of you who are interested in reading a little bit about it, I have it on my little go-to reference apps, because I guess you can imagine I get asked this all the time. There's a research article, Turning Up the Heat on COVID-19, Heat as a Therapeutic Intervention, written by Mark Cohen. I think it's a pretty good overview on the subject for anyone interested in doing a little bit of a deeper dive there. I can put it in the chat so you can all check it afterwards.
Another question here is how to avoid contamination of mineral spring water. In Mexico, many wonderful sources of mineral springs and thermal sites are contaminated. Yeah, that is again, what comes in and what goes out. How to avoid contamination, I think approach it, well, again, that would be site specific. What is the source of the contamination? Is it just the people, or there's a runoff from the fields? Again, what would be the elements to that?
And I think that brings up a good point, JP, is that when we look at these things, there is not one overarching answer that makes sense. It is about understanding the site-specific needs of a particular water source. That could be anything from surrounding environmental factors to the mineral nature of the water itself. And we encourage anyone who works with or around hot springs, who's interested in these ideas, get the water tested. And in BANA, we work with people who have water analysis to help them kind of tease out that site-specific identity and go through kind of like the needs and concerns that are specific to that area. So that's definitely something that we want to be working with more of you on this need.
Yeah, and the way to start would be to ask yourself, where am I now? The drop of water that leaves my place here, does that go into the Pacific Ocean? Does it go into the Atlantic Ocean? Does it go into the Mississippi and the Gulf? What is your watershed? That will give you the big picture, because that water, again, contains information all the way out to the sea. So again, allow yourself to see part of balneology is also the field, the study of what is called medical climatology. The season of the year has a lot to do with it, the elevation, and there's so many variables, it's complex. But again, in community and with communication and conversation, we can get a clearer picture that will work for deep wholeness. But again, how are you conscious about water, as well as where are you unconscious about water? Most people think, and again, our response collectively has been, well, just flush it down the toilet. But, that goes somewhere, New Orleans or where, it's, so anyway.
And I see another great question here on the timing, and I think J. Paul, like you're a great advocate of time and rhythm as kind of important aspects of kind of consideration when we think about therapy and therapeutic. The therapeutic timing, as well as the kind of the rhythmic nature of which you apply treatment. So what I would say to that question is, a 15 to 20 minutes is where the research tends to look at the kind of that tends to be the kind of standard in the research in terms of when they're looking for biological effects. So what I presented on, I would say it's pretty safe to say a 15-minute soak in kind of a hot water or a hot sauna would get you a lot of those. That's what the research I pulled that data from would say.
And then that 15th minute is also in a rhythm where you're 15 minutes out and you're cooling off, and then you can go back in again. So there is a rhythm of perhaps 3 baths in a row. And again, over 3 weeks, ideally it would be nice. The longer, you can't rush Mother Nature, so to speak. You can't rush this. You have to find out what is the rhythm. There's also research that has to do, say, it's where the phase of the moon and what's going on astrologically. There's a lot of different approaches to that. 20-minute hot soak, but then with a cooling down. You don't have to jump into an ice pool, or you don't have to do extreme ice, but it's basically cooling down so that when you go in for the second time, you're going in at normal body temperature. So there's a rhythm there. And again,
sorry, JP.
Go ahead.
I was going to say that's another wonderful therapeutic consideration is how quickly do you heat up the body and to what temperature? How quickly do you cool it down and to what temperature? All these things are where A trained balneologist can kind of look at kind of a case in front of them and say, okay, here's how we want to play with these different therapeutic tools. I mean, that's the brilliance of water. It's in some ways, okay, it's just water, but you can do so much with it if you understand the nuance of how to apply it. And that's what we're hoping to kind of bring out here.
It's not just a doctor's appointment for medication, so to speak, but it is a way of life. There is a culture to it. There's a rhythm, and there's community to it. The stories that come out of these locations, the memories that have happened, and of course, many of these sites are indigenous, going back to hot springs. All the major natural sites were obviously used by indigenous populations here in North America as well as elsewhere. So there is a spirit to these springs, and allowing one's imagination to listen to these.
I think that's the beautiful thing of this, is that there's an intuitive part of that. I think anyone who's soaked in a hot spring, I see we got greetings from Esalen Institute, so I can attest to the spiritual and kind of imaginative forces at play when I soaked at water at Esalen. There is all the physical things that we discussed, but that makes space for psychological, emotional, and spiritual processes to happen as well. And those things are not separate from each other. They're holographically integrated. I firmly believe that. My practice is very medically focused, very physically focused, but when you keep that and you see these things time and time again, where all of a sudden people have these profound, life-altering experiences, you see that enough and you say, okay, these things are a holistic, integrative, whole being. And the question on seniors also is, again, it's just about understanding that person and what phase of life they're in and how to support them utilizing these different, kind of the different phases of water, as J. Paul was saying. It's too big to get into right now, but in terms of like elder care and the patient-specific care, always. So understanding the patient and their specific needs, understanding the therapies that you want to apply and how to alter them to meet those needs is the main point.
Mm-hmm. But no, that's a good question. I think more seniors that would, walk-in bathtubs, different ways, to make it convenient, especially in the home setting or in the senior living setting.
Exercising in swimming pools to prevent falls and fractures. I mean, right there, you can improve circulation and strength and balance without the risks associated with how most seniors injure themselves in those times.
A question would be to ask, where can you not use water? Or where should you not use water? And I mean, in other words, in terms of your wellness, your well-being, your wholeness, again, what Green Spa Network is all about in the planet, that I really am so happy that they moved and added the context of the planet, because this is a planetary issue. And but are there questions as to water has both a very creative, supportive side to it, but it also is destructive in the sense of floods and there is there are both sides to that. But I think the contamination thing, and we haven't gotten into the quality of the water in terms of plastics and chemicals, and there's a lot of stuff. There's a frustration with bottled water. Here we need fresh water, but then just look at the plastic that bottled water generates. I would really try to stay away from bottled water as much as but that's a huge issue there. I'd be nice to have some conversation, and again, I think this is the beginning of a long conversation. This started 40 years ago for me, and it's wonderful to see how much progress has been made in terms of the use of.
I think Douglas from Esalen is asking, are hot spring locations embracing indigenous practices of First Nations peoples?
This question came up recently at Ojo Caliente, I don't know, in New Mexico. And I know that it's important that the history, the deep history and the legacy of the indigenous use, for example, Hot Springs, Arkansas originally was a healing ground, and then in 1832 became the first national sanctuary for soldiers, for America. But Good question. I think, we need to reach that level of appreciation in identifying, but it probably depends upon the ownership. I know Thermopylae in Wyoming recognizes that, the indigenous practices there, and there are different places, but
I think that if you look, oh, sorry.
it behooves us to, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I think if you look to most thermal spring sites in North America, when they talk about their history, most of them can go back beyond pioneer times into Native American use, and there is recognition of that. I think to varying degrees, that recognition is extended into some sort of reintegration into the land practice and the conscious land, or kind of native stewardship. There's a lot of work to be done there, and I do think that hot spring owners and operators are uniquely attuned to the nature around them and understand through that lens the need for kind of healing of American and indigenous cultures, and especially around these things. So there's the classic story that you hear around the world, actually, that thermal springs are a peace place. It's a place where wars don't occur, where weapons are not brought, where it's for healing. And so I look to these sites, and I think Esalen, of course, has a strong and long tradition of this, and many others of how do these sites look to that, start leading the conversation on cultural awareness and cultural integration into healing at the cultural level. Again, integrative medicine, holistic medicine is physical, but it's also spiritual, it's individual, but it's also cultural. You cannot separate these things.
It leads to a long conversation in terms of tribalization and indigenous tribes in terms of colonization, and then how the blending of these cultures. So I think it's, this, how does tribalism and colonization blend, and how will that evolve in this new planetary awareness?
Well, that is a very interesting thought.
That's the planet. That's the planet.
Well, yes, and I also think, in listening to your conversation, that you're also just talking about how to honor the roots of the location, right? Regardless of how it originated or who were the originators, the sort of spiritual and earthly connection to the waters is important to acknowledge. I wanted to say thank you both for this really great conversation. That was wonderful, and always educational to hear and speak to both of you. And thank you for all who came and were listening this afternoon. And I know that you guys are back in a couple of weeks, November 9th, where we talk about the way of the water is through hygiene. And so I think that'll be also an interesting conversation. Thank you very much.
Look forward. Thank you, Professor.
Dear Joanna.
Right. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Blessings.
Yes.
Go soak.
Yes.
Take it.